Hello and welcome. I'm Savri Jindal and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump have returned to the United States following the successful state visit. During a joint news conference with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer back in the United Kingdom, President Trump discussed efforts to end the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. The two leaders also announced a new US-UK technology partnership focused on AI and nuclear power. US President Donald Trump has suggested some TV networks should have their licenses taken away, and a row over ABC's host Jimmy Kimmel. Now, the Disney-owned network announced it was suspending Kimmel indefinitely following backlash over his comments about the murder of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk. The United States vetoed a crucial UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza as Israel intensified its offensive. This is the sixth time that the United States has vetoed a resolution on the truce at the UN since the beginning of the war on October 7th. The resolution, supported by 14 of the 15 members, demand an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, the release of hostages, and increased humanitarian aid. The Israeli army urged the government on Thursday to halt the entry of humanitarian aid from Jordan to Gaza following a shooting attack at the border crossing. Israel's Lieutenant General recommended suspending aid until an investigation into the incident is completed and revised screening procedures for Jordanian drivers are implemented. The shooter, identified as a Jordanian truck driver, was transporting aid to Gaza when the attack occurred. Israel launched a new wave of airstrikes on Thursday targeting Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon, aiming to prevent the terror group from rebuilding in the area. The Israeli Defense Forces issued evacuation warnings for 4 sites, later expanding the order to 2 additional buildings. According to the IDF, the strikes were ordered in response to Hezbollah's attempts to resume its operations in the region. French President Emmanuel Macron stated that he expects international sanctions on Iran to be reinstated by the end of the month, citing Iran's lack of seriousness in addressing concerns over its nuclear program. In an exclusive interview, Macron confirmed his belief that sanctions would return following recent developments in Tehran's action. Last month, Britain, France and Germany, signatories to the 2015 nuclear agreement, triggered a mechanism to address Iran's non-compliance. Thailand's King Maha Vajiralongkorn has officially endorsed Prime Minister Anutin Charnavakul's new cabinet, according to a notice in the Royal Gazette. This endorsement clears the way for the cabinet to take oath before the king, a necessary step before they can address Parliament. Following the oath, the ministers will be able to formally assume their duties. Canada and Mexico pledged to deepen their bilateral ties and strengthen their free trade pact with the United States during Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to Mexico. At a press conference, Carney and President Claudia Sheinbaum emphasized expanding economic and security cooperation, as well as their shared commitment to their partnership with the U.S. All right, our top focus this hour, developments that have taken place in the United Kingdom. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has concluded his second state visit to the United Kingdom, which he described as an exquisite honor. During the visit, President Trump held meetings with King Charles, British Prime Minister Starmer, and other government officials. In his historic second state visit, US and the UK made progress on various fronts. President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer held meetings with business leaders. The agreement signed between the two countries involves $30 billion investment from Microsoft in the United Kingdom. NVIDIA and a data center company, CoreWeave, have also pledged investments in the United Kingdom. Civil nuclear power deal was also signed, where American company X Energy and British's Centrica announces that they would deploy nuclear reactors across UK beyond agreements. Both the leaders talked about various issues of geopolitics, including Prime Minister Starmer's defense of Online Safety Act, which the Trump administration has criticized for being unjust against American companies. President Trump also stated that they have had few disagreements. Let's in fact take a listen to what he said.
I think he's a very nice man. His wife is fascinating. And, we live for a day. And, the thing I disagree with him is immigration, which is very rough for the UK, very rough. And energy. What do you think of budget? As I said, it's North Sea, I had that, and I go, fortune.
All right. Well, joining us at this point in time is Mr. Spencer Critchley, political commentator, joining us from San Francisco, California. So thank you for your time speaking to us on NewsX World. What do you make of this pact that has now been inked between the US and UK? Yes, of course, there were some points of disagreement over there, including immigration and energy. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's very early to know what to make of it, until we see some details, starting with how much substance is involved, because while I think Prime Minister Starmer is probably trustworthy on this score in terms of announcing that there's some kind of deal with President Trump, all too often what he hails as a deal turns out to be little more than a press release. It looks like some business was done. We'll have to see what that amounts to. I guess the other thing I might point out is that Trump's view of international trade is very hard to pin down. On the one hand, the idea of the nuclear energy cooperation seems to fit into his idea that he wants other people to buy goods and services from the United States, but having foreign direct investment going from the United States into the UK and creating jobs there is great for the UK, but it seems like that's a capital outflow from the United States, and I think Donald Trump generally hates that kind of thing. He I think his view of international trade amounts to money coming in good, money going out bad.
Right, absolutely. I'd also like to understand from you, we've speaking about, of course, the press conference that took place. What are the key highlight points for you?
Well, the thing is that with all of these things, again, with Prime Minister Starmer, whether one's a supporter of his or not, however one judges his performance, he's a credible world leader. And whenever I talk about Donald Trump, I'm sure people who've seen me talk about him more than once have noticed I almost never have anything good to say about him. And this is really a challenge because I myself am very skeptical of people who can't think of a single good thing to say about an elected official. And usually that's just a sign of political bias, and they either refuse to or are unable to see anything good about this person. But the trouble with Donald Trump is he has a couple of key faults that are so overwhelmingly negative. I actually think that it's a mistake to even bother analyzing and assessing any of his other positions. The key point here is that this man is a corrupt dictator in progress. He would be a dictator already fully if he had managed to fulfill all his dreams. But it's clear that he is dismantling American democracy, and he's doing it purely for his own self-interest. It'd be obviously more than bad enough if he was just doing part one of that. But he's also a corrupt dictator. And as part of that, he's just an absolutely pathological liar, and you cannot trust anything that he says. So this is why I really have a hard time commenting on things like this as far as President Trump is concerned. As the people of India have noticed, it's really impossible to have a deal with a person like this. You yourself have had the experience of him apparently being best friends with Prime Minister Modi and committed to this relationship with India to
Right.
both countries' benefit, and then he gets annoyed at your prime minister, and all of a sudden you're facing these punitive tariffs, supposedly because of Russian oil.
Right, so absolutely. I request you to stay on with us as we shift our focus to some other news that we are tracking. Well, in an exclusive interview aired yesterday, the US President Donald Trump spoke about various geopolitical issues, including the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump expressed his disappointment over the shooting of drones near Poland. He also stated that he is not sure if the drone incursion was a mistake or not. Take a listen.
So I'm disappointed. If you listen to some people, the ones like in Poland were shot down and they fell into Polish territory, but they shouldn't have been that close anyway. They were drones. And
do you think it was a mistake? The Polish prime minister said it was not a mistake, that they were intentionally into Polish territory.
I can't comment on whether it was a mistake or not. They shouldn't have been there, let's face it. But supposedly they were disabled.
The US president further expressed his dissatisfaction with the European nations and the NATO. According to him, they are buying Russian oil slyly, aiding the war. This comes as the president had put additional sanctions on nations like India for purchasing Russian oil. Let's in fact take a listen to what the leaders stated.
European Union nations or the NATO nations, because they're similar, very similar, when they're buying oil from Russia, that's not the greatest thing. That's not the deal. And I let it be known, and people were surprised to hear that, but they were doing it quietly and slyly. And you can't do that. If you're going to win, you're going to have to not buy oil from Russia.
Mr. Spencer Critchley continues to be with us on the broadcast. So I'd like to understand from you, were there any hopes that Putin would fall in line and agree to a ceasefire? Or was this something that was perhaps expected? What do you make of it?
I think President Trump may have been pretty close to the last person in the world, at least who isn't living inside the Russian propaganda bubble, who was surprised at that. Let me say, by the way, that I would say that while it doesn't in any way change my opinion of Mr. Trump's utter lack of fitness as a leader, I agree with him about Russian oil purchases in principle. I wish all other countries would stop buying Russian oil and treat Russia as the international pariah that it should be seen as. I recognize that it can be impossible for a country to just suddenly shut off all Russian oil imports because of the economic impact that would cause domestically, in some cases causing real hardship, for example, with heating oil during winter months in cold countries. And also, I would note that the European Union has reduced its imports of Russian oil in just a matter of a couple of years by a factor of something like 15 times. And I believe the EU-wide importation of Russian oil as a percentage of their total oil and gas imports is something like 2.5% or something of all of their imports. So, I think this is yet another red herring by President Trump. For some reason, he is just incredibly reluctant to actually enact any kind of sanctions or take any action that Putin would actually notice. He will threaten these days, finally. He has finally realized that Putin is not his best friend like he thought he was. But he keeps saying he's considering sanctions, and he may be about to impose sanctions, and here they come, but they never arrive. And I think that this claim that, you go first, all of Europe must go first and completely end all of their imports of Russian oil, and then supposedly Trump would do that has no credibility.
Right, absolutely. I request you to stay on with us as we reflect on some more news that's coming our way. Well, during the same interview, Trump also discussed the progress on the TikTok deal with China, saying that it appeared China had approved the deal, which he believes would benefit the United States financially. He also stated that a call with the Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled for today. Take a listen.
I'm speaking with President Xi, as you know, on Friday, having to do with TikTok and also trade, and we're very close to deals on all of it. And my relationship with China is very good. You know, we have a trade deal with them. We had a very good meeting the other day. And it sounds like they've approved TikTok, and TikTok is a tremendous amount of money for the United States, so that was nice.
All right, Mr. Spencer Critchley continues to be with us on the broadcast. You know, we just heard the statements that were made by U.S. President Donald Trump. A phone call is expected to take place shortly. What do you make of it? What do you make of this entire deal?
Well, here's another one, unfortunately, on the downside for Trump, at least in terms of my view of things. He has been illegally blocking the sale of TikTok for months and months now. And I'm sorry, he's been illegally preventing the divestiture of ownership in TikTok for months and months. Congress actually passed a law about this. However one feels about the ownership of TikTok, when the U.S. Congress passes a law, the president's duty is to see that the laws are faithfully executed. This is in the United States Constitution. Congress has the power of making laws, including that law. The president does not have the power to make laws. This is a key part of Trump's effort to convert the United States from a democracy into an autocracy, seizing the control from Congress to make laws. And when he doesn't like a law, he just ignores it. And he has managed to build a Supreme Court that has given him immunity from lawlessness to a large extent. So we'll see how the actual TikTok deal works out. There's also some question apparently about whether the American buyers are going to get access to the underlying algorithm, which is the computer programming that essentially makes the product addictive and is central to its economic value. Another area to keep a very close eye on is the sale is being made to a consortium of companies led by Oracle Corporation, whose CEO, Larry Ellison, is one of Trump's best friends. And as of a few days ago, the world's richest man when the value of Oracle shot up dramatically in a single day. And then unfortunately, this is yet another area where you have to ask yourself, is President Trump acting in the interest of the United States, the people of the United States for whom he works as an American president? The people are his boss. According to the Constitution, they are, certainly not according to him. Or is President Trump working for himself and his buddies? And I think the answer to that question is obvious.
Right, absolutely. I request you to stay on with us as we tilt our focus to some more news that we are tracking. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has celebrated the suspension of late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. Trump called Kimmel untalented and, in fact, defended Kirk. He even suggested that broadcasters should lose their license for negative coverage. The discussion to yank Jimmy Kimmel live came after the comedian mocked Trump and his allies over the murder of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk. Since then, critics say Trump and Republicans are cracking down on free speech. Let's in fact take a listen to what the U.S. president has said.
A lot of people, anybody could replace him. The guy had no talent. Kimmel he was fired, he had no talent. He's a whack job, but he had no talent. And more importantly than talent, he had no, because a lot of people have no talent, they get ratings. But he had no ratings. His ratings were worse than Colbert, I think. They got rid of Colbert, which was a good thing to do. And look, that's something that should be talked about for licensing too. When you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump, that's all they do.
Meanwhile, former President Barack Obama and civil liberty groups have called the move an unconstitutional attack on the First Amendment. The FCC is now reviewing Kimmel's commentary, but federal law bars the government from pulling licenses over critical speech. Fans of Jimmy Kimmel have criticized the decision, and protesters rallied outside Kimmel's Hollywood studio demanding his return. Listen in to what some of the protesters have to say.
We are actively seeing the First Amendment, our freedom of speech, being stripped of us, and not just the general public. Those rich, white, famous men like Colbert and Kimmel, who have a gigantic platform and still are being deplatformed. The freedom of speech our American constitutional right of freedom of speech is being taken from everyone. People at the top and people at the bottom. And we need to stand up to it. Stand up to Trump. Stand up to the violation of the Constitution everywhere we see.
It's illegitimate. It's fascist suppression of speech. This is a dictator move. You have the FCC who's saying that we could do this the easy way, we could do this the hard way. This is a fascist takeover of America, and the only way we're going to stop it is through the power of the people. November 5th in Washington, D.C. Be there.
The biggest threat to their power is Jimmy Kimmel's making fun of Trump's new ballroom. Boo! Really? That's what keeps them up at late night? Not inflation, not climate collapse, not people unable to afford rent, but Jimmy Kimmel's telling a monologue about Trump's new toys like a ballroom. It would be hilarious if it wasn't terrifying. Because what just happened isn't about one guy losing a show. It's about a government testing how far it can push censorship.
Well, joining us at this point in time is Daniel Bloom, political commentator, joining us from Los Angeles, California. Thank you so much for your time speaking to us on NewsX World. I'd like to understand from you, what exactly is the sentiment on the ground at this point in time with the suspension of the Jimmy Kimmel show?
Well, it's interesting how the party that started cancel culture is now upset when the shoe is on the other foot, that their own guys are getting canceled. All of a sudden, they're screaming free speech. When I remember back in 2020, when anyone even breathed anything that would remotely sound racist, they were immediately taken off the air. And there was no screaming of free speech then. Jimmy Kimmel was not making jokes. The country is grieving. Charlie Kirk, whether you like him or not, was a calm, rational debater. And for Jimmy Kimmel to say that this was done by someone on the inside MAGA party and using this assassination for political gain is despicable. And I'm sorry, you created cancel culture. Don't complain about it being with your guy being canceled.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Spencer Critchley is also with us on the broadcast. I'd like to understand from you, of course, now we've heard the statements that have been made by Ms. Bloom. She said that Jimmy Kimmel was not making jokes. It was a very insensitive statement that was made at a time when people were mourning the loss of Charlie Kirk. What do you essentially make of the decision that has been made to cancel Jimmy Kimmel's show? Sir, could I request you to unmute yourself? We're unable to hear you.
If a private corporation fires an employee, they have wide latitude to do that, including if the employee says something that they feel has damaged the reputation of the company, for example. The problem is when the government directs that, and that's what's going on here. So we could argue about what Jimmy Kimmel said. I think that's being hyped up dramatically, but it's irrelevant to the issue at hand. The government here is directing private corporations to hire and fire people based on their speech, and that's a direct violation of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So, like President Trump is directly violating Article 1 of the Constitution, which gives lawmaking power to the Congress, he's violating the First Amendment, which protects free speech. So that's the key issue here. In terms of the argument that the left is engaged in cancel culture, so you should just accept it. This is the same whataboutism argument that comes up frequently, and whoever engages in whataboutism is essentially advertising the fact that they have no moral standards if you look at the logic of it, because what whataboutism depends on is What about the time you did the worst behavior I can think of that your side did? I demand the right to behave that way. So essentially you're saying we should be engaged in a death spiral towards the lowest possible moral standards. So the worst, whatever the worst is that one side does, the other side automatically should be allowed to do that. Obviously that makes no sense, and obviously nobody would really want to live that way. You certainly can find examples of cancel culture on the left. That's where the phrase originated. And I would say there is a problem with an illiberal left that actually does not believe in liberalism, the philosophy on which the United States was founded, the philosophy of freedom, equality, democracy, etc. And it's an unrecognized and poorly understood problem, I think. It's not a problem of the far left as if there's only one left. This is a problem of a very different kind of left that does not believe in liberalism. And the same problem exists on the right. Conservatives on the right believe in liberalism, but Trump is not a conservative. He's on the illiberal right. He does not believe in liberalism, the same philosophy that I just referred to on which the country is founded. And I actually think the far more serious problem in the United States is not a contest between the left and the right. It's a contest between people who believe in liberalism and people who do not believe in liberalism, whether they're on the left or the right.
Right, absolutely. With that, Mr. Spencer Critchley, thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. We are going to shift our focus to some other news that we are tracking. Well, the United States vetoed a United Nations Security Council resolution demanding an immediate unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. The resolution, which received 14 votes in favor, called for the lifting of restrictions on humanitarian aid and the immediate release of all hostages held by Hamas. This marks the 6th time the U.S. has cast a veto in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, shielding its ally Israel from international pressure. Let's in fact listen in to the statement made by the U.S. envoy while raising her hand to veto the truce.
So, the United States rejects this unacceptable resolution. It is beyond time that Hamas release every single hostage now and surrender immediately. The United States will continue to work with its partners to bring an end to this horrific conflict. U.S. opposition to this resolution will come as no surprise. It fails to condemn Hamas or recognize Israel's right to defend itself, and it wrongly legitimizes the false narratives benefiting Hamas, which have sadly found currency in this council. Hamas is responsible for starting and continuing this war. Israel has accepted proposed terms that would end the war, but Hamas continues to reject them. This war could end today if Hamas freed the hostages and laid down its arms.
Ms. Daniel Bloom continues to be with us on the broadcast. I'd like to understand from you, U.S. has vetoed UN Security Council Gaza ceasefire demand for the 6th time. What is the view that the U.S. has on the resolution of this war?
Well, it depends who you talk to. I am very much a Trump supporter. Trump and a lot of his patriots believe in peace through strength, not diplomacy. That is what the Middle East understand. It's very easy for the UN, who has disproportionately criticized Israel, to want to find a resolution. But they're not the ones surrounded by enemies, namely Hamas and Hezbollah, benefiting from money from Iran, which was lifted by the Biden administration, emboldening them to further terrorism. It's very easy for them to create resolutions, but if the reality is not met with a secure guarantee of Hamas de-radicalization, a secure guarantee that all of the hostages are returned, including the ones who are alive and including the ones who have passed, then there's nothing to talk about.
Right, absolutely. I request you to stay on with us as we reflect some more news coming our way. Well, a driver bringing humanitarian aid from Gaza, from Jordan for Gaza, opened fire at and killed 2 Israeli soldiers at the Allenby Bridge crossing between Jordan and the occupied West Bank. The soldiers aged about 20 and 60, were shot and later died of their wounds. Reports say the attacker may have used a knife after his gun malfunctioned. The crossing was immediately closed, and Israel's military chief recommended halting humanitarian aid from Jordan until security protocols are reviewed. Israel blamed the attack on Jordanian incitement, while Jordan condemned it as a violation of international law. The bridge, a crucial gateway for Palestinians unable to travel through Israel, has been targeted before, including a deadly attack last September. Ms. Daniel Bloom continues to be with us on the broadcast. Ma'am, what do you make of this development that has taken place at the Jordan border?
Yes. Once again, I don't know any other country in the world whose citizens were so brutally attacked in the most barbaric ways, yet still has international pressure to ensure such a significant amount of humanitarian aid is given, which Israel has. They just earmarked $430 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza. But Israel has a right to security. And if they have an ally in Jordan to ensure that humanitarian aid gets to the Gaza civilians, but Jordan is not doing their part to guarantee the safety of the IDF soldiers, then we have a problem. But to Jordan's credit, they did condemn this act. There is further investigation that's needed. But until there is a better guarantee, why should Israel risk the lives of its citizens to ensure aid to Gaza? More pressure needs to be put on Hamas.
Right, absolutely. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us on NewsX World, sharing your perspectives with us. We leave it there and shift our focus to some more news coming in. Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes against Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. The IDF says the strikes aimed to stop the group from rebuilding, particularly its elite Radwan force. Residents were ordered to evacuate before the attacks, which hit multiple sites, including weapon depots. In fact, Lebanon's Prime Minister Nawaf Salam condemned the strikes, questioning Israel's commitment to the ceasefire agreement in place since last November. Hezbollah has accused Israel of terrorism, but did not deny rebuilding operations. The IDF says Hezbollah's move violates the truce, and it has carried out hundreds of strikes in the past year. Well, this is all the time that we have as of now. We will continue to bring you more updates from around the world. Stay tuned.